We're going to do chapter 18 and 19 today. And I just want to recap quickly what happened in 16 and 17, just the basic big events. Goethe goes to that welcome building and realizes what the treasure is. And it's not any treasure, it's a way to dig over to the east, at least she thinks. And then in chapter 17, Fritz tells Goethe that he's planning on escaping by swimming across the Spree River. And Goethe decides that last second to tell him about the tunnel, which for now stops him from escaping. So I'm going to show you some pictures to kind of go along with what's going on in the story. With the Spree River. I want you to be able to picture that in your mind. That really helps me when I'm reading historical fiction to be able to get a picture. Okay, so of course the Spree River still exists, but this is what it looked like back then in one part. Okay, so you can see there's big ships going through there. It's pretty wide, probably very cold, and there's fences on what would be the east side. Okay, so that's what Fritz was planning on swimming across, and it's obviously very dangerous. And here's a map. So this is what it would have looked like with West Berlin and East Berlin, okay? So you can see where the Spree River kind of goes, and at some point along, it would be on both the east and west side, so you could swim across. And Checkpoint Charlie is a famous place on the border that's also mentioned in the book. So there's some visuals to kind of help you out. Okay, so the big thinking prompts that I want you to keep in mind, okay? Our next parlay discussion is going to be about trust and risk. Not together, but as two separate things, okay? So I want you to be thinking about how trust is a theme in this book and how risk is a theme in this book, and connect those ideas to yourself as you listen to me read, okay? Think, would I be as trusting in this situation as Goethe or Fritz or Anna? Or would I not be trusting? Or would I be taking these kind of risks in this situation, like the risk that her father is taking, and the risk that Herr Kraus took, and all of these people who are doing different risky things, and just kind of connect with that theme as I read, okay? All right. So now her and Fritz are going over to the welcome building. I arrived at the building first, and despite how anxious I was to get down into the shelter and begin digging, I forced myself to wait in the basement to be sure Fritz got in safely. He approached the building the same way I had, using the shadow of the wall to hide him. I waved him in through the window, and after he slid inside, we shut the boards up again. Fritz was bigger than me, so he had separated the boards even wider, and the nails were bent. If someone really looked at this window, they might notice that the boards didn't shut tight anymore. That made me nervous, but there wasn't much we could do about it. He started to talk, but I'd already opened the heavy metal door into the air raid shelter and quietly motioned for him to follow me. The shovel was down there too, ready to begin. Without saying a word, Fritz stood in the shelter, inspecting it just as I had a day earlier. He opened the crates, patted at the walls, and dug into the dirt to test it. His eyes ran along the ceiling, no doubt questioning where the line for the Berlin Wall should be. If it weren't beneath it already, then it couldn't be more than a meter away. "How did you find this place?" he asked. In a whispered voice, I told him everything, about seeing Dominic and Papa and the dance Papa did on the platform and getting the picture from Anna. I fully expected his excitement to grow at the prospect of tunneling to freedom, to see his eyes widen the way mine had when I first realized the possibilities down there. If he planned to swim the Spree anyway, this was a much safer plan, and this offered the chance for all of us to get to the west. But instead of showing any enthusiasm, it was just the opposite. With every new revelation, his shoulders slumped further, and the light dimmed in his face. "You were young when Father left, so you didn't know him as well." The tone in Fritz's voice was sympathetic, as if my innocence deserved his pity. The sympathetic means like he feels bad for her. He's kind of talking down to her a little bit. "You must have misunderstood his message, if there even was a message. Father never would have asked us to put ourselves in this much danger. Never." So here's the first kind of point in this chapter where we're talking about risk. Fritz does not think that Dad would have done such a risk to put their lives in danger like this. What do you think? And are you kind of surprised by Fritz's reaction to Goethe's plan? Like Goethe was like, oh my gosh, they have this amazing plan, and then Fritz is kind of shutting it down a little bit right now, isn't he? But he did, Fritz. I saw him and you didn't. You saw him doing a children's dance and read meaning into it. Then why did he send that picture? How do you know it's from him? In frustration, Fritz turned from me and ran a hand through his hair. How do you know it's not some test from the Stasi to get us here and then have a legitimate reason to arrest us? They don't play games like that. They do, Goethe. They do that all the time. If they believe our family has some sort of rebellious streak, do you think they'll really sit back and wait for us to commit a crime when they could just trap us now? Or maybe Anna's family drew this picture to lure us here so they can turn us into the Stasi and get forgiven for what Peter did. Wow. So here's another great word, rebellious. So do they think that this family is like, all of them have a rebellious streak, meaning that they are going against the rules? Okay. Anna's family wouldn't, yes they would. And if you want to stay naive about how dangerous this tunneling idea is, then you have no business even thinking about it. Remember last time we learned that word naive? It's coming up again, so I highlighted it again because it's an important word in this book. We have the youngest member of this family taking all the risks. Does that mean she's naive? Is she being naive? Remember, that means she's not really thinking things through. A little bit young and innocent, not considering all of the possibilities. Our friends could betray us. Family members could betray us. Some stranger on the street could report us and we'd never know who it was. There's nobody we can trust. But he had said us, Fritz and me together. Fritz would never betray me, and even if the Stasi locked me up for a century and did their worst, I would never betray him. I picked up the shovel and pushed it into the dirt wall. Look at the way it crumbles, Fritz. This is soft dirt. He put his hand to it and more dirt fell. Where's the boundary for the death strip? I pointed to his feet. You're standing on it now. He stood back and watched me, which was something. At least he wasn't leaving and dragging me away with him. We could never do something this big, Fritz said. I don't know a thing about tunneling. We can figure it out as we go, I said. All we have to do is keep moving forward and make sure the ground above us doesn't cave in. A couple weeks of digging, and then we're out on the other side. So again, is Goethe being naive? Is it really that easy to tunnel? They sweep the death strip with sound sensors, he said. But thanks to the shelter, we're already pretty deep. If only we knew how wide the death strip is here. Now his mind was working. And we would have to make sure this tunnel came out into a safe place on the other side, inside another building or something. How can we find that exit when we can't even see over there? We can figure that out too, I said. And Anna's apartment isn't far away. I can see the death strip from her bedroom and figure out how wide it is from there. How will you get inside? She isn't speaking to you. I shrugged. First I had to get him to agree to the plan. Details like getting into an ex-friend's home could be worked out afterwards. Fritz took the shovel and dug at the dirt, trying it for himself. Within a few minutes, he already had a gap wide enough that he could stand inside it. Then he turned around. What would we do with all the dirt? There's going to be a lot of it. We can leave it in the room right above us. Nobody looks in there, so it won't be noticed. Yes, but we would be. It'll take a long time to dig this. Someone will see us coming and going from here and start to wonder why. And we'll be dirty with no way to wash off until we get home. I'd already thought about that too. On my way to bringing the shovel here, Frau Eberhard asked where I was going. I told her the shovel was for a garden. What if we did plant one right outside the building? It's only dirt out there and nobody appears to be using it. We could garden in the day while people are watching and then tunnel when they aren't. He dug at the tunnel again, his way of thinking it over. I don't know, Goethe. I grabbed his arm. This is better than trying to swim the Spree. You'll die if you go that way. And whether you make it to the other side or not, what will the Stasi do to Mama and I afterward? We know they've terrified Anna's family. Do you want them to come after us that way? No, he mumbled. Of course not. If you're going to escape, then we need a way for all of us to escape. We're a family, Fritz. Half of us are already on the other side. If we're going to cross to be together, it has to be all of us. Fritz stared at me a moment. then crouched down to stare at the dirt wall in front of him. "You're right," he finally said. My heart leapt. "Then we're building a tunnel?" "No." Fritz drew himself back to his full height. "No, you're right about the danger. Mama will be home on Sunday and she'll never agree to this plan. I don't know what message Papa intended to send you, but he wouldn't want us to dig either. If anyone can make such a crazy idea work, it's you, but it's not worth a risk to our family." So here's that theme of risk showing up again. And the characters in this book have really different ideas about what is worth the risk. Do you think that has to do with like their personalities or their age? And do you think that the dad would really want them to risk their lives like this? This was a good plan, and it was slipping through my fingers like water. "Listen to me, please, if we just..." "It's over, Goethe." Then he rubbed my head with his hand, something I didn't appreciate at all this time. So do you think that she's justified feeling disappointed right now? Should she feel disappointed right now? Would you? We climbed back up the ladder into the basement and pulled the boards closed as best as we could, never to return there again. All right, chapter 19. The night before the last day of school was a long one. I wasn't sleeping well anyway because of my excitement to begin summer break. So when I heard the sounds in the apartment next door, I easily woke up. Someone was crying in the neighborhood apartment, but no one, not just anyone, it was Herr Kraus. I couldn't understand that at first. Herr Kraus was a strong man who'd come through 2 world wars and hunger and the death of his wife. I wouldn't have thought anything could affect him so greatly now. Maybe even though he had been released from his arrest, the Stasi had done something that was still torturing him. Because he was clearly crying, which made me hurt too. And there's her empathy again. In the week before the wall went up, at almost the same time he had warned my own family to leave, he had sent his children and their families across the border. If his wife had been well enough to travel, I knew he would have gone with them. Now he was alone, surrounded by a crowded apartment of assorted tools, car parts, and trinkets that would do nothing to comfort him. The crying bothered me enough that I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen for a drink of water. I was surprised to see Fritz there. "Herr Kraus woke you up too?" he asked. I nodded, and Fritz turned on the water tap and then a small radio that Mama kept on the counter. While it blared out some all-night dance music, he motioned for me to lean toward him. He whispered directly in my ear, "He's done that every night since you came home." It was his crying that finally made me decide to swim the spree. "I thought you weren't..." "I won't. You were right before about the risks of trying to escape that way, but I've been awake all night listening to Herr Kraus and wondering what happened to make him cry like that. Then I wondered if that could become me or you or Mama one day. My mind was already made up to leave Goethe. I just wasn't sure about how." He drew in a breath and then said, "Papa might not want us to dig, and Mama would never give us permission, but it doesn't matter anymore. We're going to build that tunnel." So think about all the events that had to happen for Fritz to come around on this. Think of things that have happened to him. Losing his girlfriend, Herr Kraus, seeing his friend Victor, who'd completely changed after joining the secret police, realizing through his little sister that swimming the spree wasn't possible, and maybe a good night's sleep. I felt so happy that I nearly cried out, but Fritz made up some excuse to the microphones about the water not warming up and maybe we could try in the morning instead. Then he winked at me and leaned closer to mouth the words, "Tomorrow we begin." It was a lucky thing that this was the last day of school because I barely heard anything my teacher said in class. We had some tests that I undoubtedly, meaning no doubt, flunked. And in any other situation that would be a serious problem. But what did I care now? I wouldn't be here when the next school year began. The one detail I did have to pay attention to was Anna. As our relationship stood right now, I wouldn't get inside her apartment for a simple drink of water, much less the chance to see the death strip. But I hoped to plant the idea of maybe letting me visit one day soon. So at lunchtime, I sat next to her as casually as possible. Her mouth started to drop open and then pinched close. For the past 2 months, I'd eaten alone, just as she had. With my brother's arrest and her brother's death, we were equally tainted. And tainted is a great word that I wanted to highlight. It means that there's something bad that has like contaminated it. So if you have like water and you put some poison in it, it would be tainted. So when someone is tainted, that means other people don't want to be near them because something bad's following them around, okay? While I picked up my sandwich, she began studying hers as if cheese and sauerkraut were suddenly too fascinating for her to be bothered with me. So sauerkraut is like a delicious German condiment. It's like pickled cabbage. My plan was to act as if everything was normal between us. It wasn't so many weeks ago when I'd never had sat anywhere for lunch other than right beside Anna, and when she'd have saved the seat for me. Why not just pretend this is one of those days? I'm sure excited about summer, I said enthusiastically. Do you have any plans? Anna ignored me, or pretended to. I knew she was listening. I continued on. Mama left to take care of my grandmother, and Fritz isn't working, so we had a great idea. We found this patch of dirt that looks completely abandoned. We might try planting a garden there. Neither of us knows much about gardening, though, do you? I didn't really wait for her to answer. There wasn't any point when she was still working so hard to pretend I didn't exist. So I reached for my dessert, a fruit crumble that was actually quite good, and kept speaking while I ate it. The dirt patch isn't far from your apartment, just down an alley to the west. Maybe if I'm working one day and it gets too hot, I could come by for a glass of water. By this point, I was getting frustrated. Talking to Anna wasn't much different than talking to a stone, and I figured the stone would be friendlier. We'll plant corn, I think, maybe some for other stuff too, or whatever we can get seeds for. We're going to start on it today when school's over. We probably can't sell the harvest. I'm sure the state wouldn't allow that, but we could give it away. It's just too bad we can't sell it. I bet our corn will be so good, so juicy and sweet that every family in Berlin will want some. We could make ourselves rich. Stop it! Anna slammed down her sandwich hard enough. She nearly smashed it in her fist. She turned to me and hissed, "Why do you have to talk that way? Why do you have to think that way? You'll probably get in trouble for growing it. And even if you don't, why do you have to care about getting rich? I know you admire the West, Goethe, with all their rich people. But there are also many poor people too. Nobody has everything here, but at least everyone has something. Why can't that be enough for you?" Anna's reaction, I think, here shows how little she understands Goethe. She thinks that Goethe admires the West because they have more things and better things, but I think we know that is not true. I was so taken aback by her words that I only sat there in shock. It wasn't things I longed for. Notice how the author emphasized the word things. What I wanted was far simpler and somehow much more complicated. I wanted books that weren't censored. I wanted to see places that were now only pictures in the smuggled magazines that had passed through my hands. Places like the canals of Venice or the beaches in the south of France, or maybe even one day the Statue of Liberty in the United States. I wanted a home without hidden microphones and friends and neighbors I could talk to without wondering if they would report me to the secret police. And I wanted control over my own life, the chance to succeed. Maybe I would fail, but if I did, it shouldn't be because some Stasi officer holding my file had made that decision for me. None of that involved my interest in things, and I was angry with Anna for accusing me of caring about anything so trivial. Trivial means stuff that just doesn't matter. "If you don't want the corn we grow, then that's fine," I said. "I wouldn't share it with you now anyway." Then I stood up and marched away. Only then did I realize the strange irony in my words to her. Of course I wouldn't share our corn with her. I couldn't. There was only one reason for us to be on that land, and it had nothing to do with a garden. All right, hope you enjoyed.